set up and do it all over again. And we were doing 6, 7 shows a week.
The first week at Tracks, it would be like 20 people. Then the next week it'd be 40. It doubled every week. I mean, just the growth of it was phenomenal.
What would you say?
People started taping our music. Then we'd start going to towns we'd never been to before, and kids would all be singing the music.
The first time the band ever went to Boulder, Colorado and played the Fox Theater, all these kids were there singing, and the band couldn't figure out why. And it's because the tapes were being traded. And what was such a smart move is Corn Capshaw, the band's manager, would have them play in places where he knew college kids congregated over the holidays, whether that's Christmas break, spring break, summer, whatever. He knew he was reaching more than just Chapel Hill, North Carolina at the right time. He was reaching all these college kids that would then go back and spread it through the dorms and whatnot, and that's why the band grew.
It certainly wasn't radio or anything like that. It was definitely homemade tapes. There was no digital access to us at that stage. It was back in the dark ages.
It was so unique in the time that the band broke. It was in the time of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Seattle and grunge. There was no electric guitar, there was a violin, there was a saxophone. But yet the power from the stage was always there.
The energy in the crowd, the energy of all the fans, just was infectious.
Lights down, you have to die.
It got crazy really quickly.
It just resonated with me. Because I wasn't thinking like a record executive, I was thinking like a fan. I just got caught up in the moment.
After we were signed, we recorded our own sort of half live, half studio album called Remember Two Things.
Basically, our album that we made, and it was kind of like thing we're basically selling out of the back of the trunk.
Going into the next chapter, I remember driving around the Virginia countryside with Dave and thinking, like, well, who would be the right guy to make their RCA debut? There was one name that kept on coming up, and we kept on listening to all these records, and Steve Lillywhite's name was on the back of all those records.
Steve was the guy that came out and without any hesitation said, I know exactly what to do with this band. I know exactly how to record what they are on stage.
I got sent a copy of their independent record, Remember Two Things, and I remember vividly sitting in the front room, putting the CD on, and it starts with the song Ants Marching, with just a snare drum, and a snare drum, and a snare drum. And this snare drum just keeps going. Every time the snare drum hit, I went, OK, this is getting more ridiculous. Something's going to happen. It was a fantastic feeling when the band came in, and I went, this is brilliant. I love this band, I love this song, and I was sold, and I thought, I have to see this band. They flew me over to New York, and I went to see them at Irving Plaza, and this gig was just fantastic. I just had this white light moment. I had this feeling that this band, I was the guy for them.
He had done so much. He was the first producer that I'd ever met to have his type background.
I love the work that he did with Peter Gabriel and the work that he did with U2. He has a great ear for sound, and I think that he made magic happen with the music that we had at that time.
Under the Table and Dreaming, when we recorded that, we were at Bearsville, New York, which is up in Woodstock.
Being there in the spring helped add to this sort of joyful feeling that we were having up there, and everything was so new and so exciting.
We recorded mostly in this barn. Steve was very much into vibe, you know what I mean? Just low lights and candles and incense.
There were a lot of things about that recording experience that were amazing. It's hard to keep that. You can't ever, it's probably like the first time you kiss someone because you can't ever have it again. To go into this great big studio and those big reels of tape, it really felt like the real thing.
I didn't want it to go completely over the top on the first album because, for a start, we were using acoustic guitars, and I had this idea that having 2 acoustic guitars, this would be the way of retaining what the band were. They said they had this guitar player called Tim Reynolds. They wanted to come and do some overdubs on the record, and I said, well, having seen them, I felt that it would be great to have Tim there from the beginning.
We were also wide-eyed and also excited about everything and so eager. It was a really exciting time.
When everyone's having fun doing it, it's the way you want every record to feel. Every record can't feel that way, but the fact that the first one did, good memories, good memories.
Under the Table and Dreaming is a beautiful album because I feel that everything was right at the right time and the stars aligned themselves.
The industry still didn't have a grasp on what the band was. They still didn't know where to put them. You know, yeah, they're playing, but they're kind of that jam band thing. They really don't play songs, which is such a misnomer. Because if the band does anything, it's the fact that they write great songs.
I started getting word that this album was doing well, and then I got phoned up by Pete Robinson again, saying, would you like to do the second album? And I went, yes, I would love to. We've got the same studio booked, and I felt that that was good for a second time. I did feel we had to change things. Second album, I thought, okay, the band had a bit of a swagger. I wanted to translate that swagger into a more muscular, meaty record. Leroy, for instance, I was talking to him about, you know, what can we do to help with this sound? And he said, well, I could get a baritone sax. And a baritone sax is this enormous, big, honking thing. And I said, yes, fantastic.
When we went back to do Crash, we had a lot of music still for that album. And then I was writing quite a bit. The song Crash was new. Yeah, I've been messing around with the idea of that song for an idea. I mean, parts of it, but the bulk of that song is most certainly inspired by the love of my life, which is my wife.
Crash into me, yeah, baby. Coming to.
Crash was special. We also, you know, we recorded also in that barn, you know, in that same studio. And, you know, it was only our second album.
The second albums are very often the most difficult ones. And I think we succeeded in coming out with a good slap to the critics.
Second albums are where you trip up. You have the big first album, very few artists. Second album outsells the first album. That happens very rarely. With Dave Matthews Band, it did. You know, I think Crash is their biggest selling album still.
We recorded before these crowded streets. We're in Sausalito, California, just across the Golden Gate. Really nice studio called The Plant.
Being a new place in a new town, it was wonderful. I loved working in the studio. So to get to go to a new studio and experience, you know, new people and got to meet great people out in San Francisco and that area and learn about that music scene and that history with that studio. With Fleetwood Mac, recorded Rumors there, and that alone was enough to get me excited.
This is the record where they felt like they could definitely take some artistic chances. Don't Drink the Water, you know, was the first single from that record, which I always thought was a great statement. You know, there were songs like Crush and Stay, and but Don't Drink the Water was like this, you know, Peter Gabriel anthem, which is, you know, something you didn't hear a lot of.
I still felt I had more to give. Maybe my big idea for this record was, let's get some guests in. Alanis Morissette, the Kronos Quartet, the ladies on Stay, for instance. Dave had this idea that he loved little snippets of music, almost like commercials between the songs. We recorded maybe half a dozen little 30-second musical interludes.
And that was a lot of fun, to work on something knowing that it was just going to be like a couple seconds.
The best way to get a groove for songs is to actually just sit down and start playing.
We're freaks. Every single one of us is a freak.
There was good fun. Dave had a lot of lyrics to write for that album.
We had to build all the songs from Before These Crowded Streets from scratch because we had played all the stuff that we had done on Under the Table and Crash.
That my brother was nice when you just sung it there.
God, that was cool. I can't. So you mean let it blossom? Yeah.
It was funny. There was one song that "Don't Drink the Water."
Don't drink the water. Don't drink the water.
And we were trying to record it, and none of us were getting along, and none of us were speaking our minds. We basically left the studio cursing, like, forget about this song, very disappointed, very angry. I think I went out and drowned my sorrows. And then we came back in the morning, and Steve said, I was surprised because we came back in this morning and listened to this recording, and that turned out to be the recording for Don't Drink the Water, and it ended up being an amazing recording. The band we were still together strongly, and we still had joyful times, but there were a lot more miles under our tires and a lot more time together. So our patience with each other was at that stage wearing a lot thinner.
I think they'd been working really hard. There was a little bit of burnout factor. Under the Table and Dreaming was exactly that. It was a dreamy record. It was pristine and nice. And Crash was more of the muscular record. Before These Crowded Streets was a darker record. It's almost like the clouds were starting to appear. It was still sunny, but the clouds were starting to appear in the scene, you know.
Listen, well, welcome back to Philadelphia. I mean, you were here during the summer, now you're back for a couple more shows for Max. It's like you non-stop touring, though.
Well, we're out all quite a lot. This is a pretty long tour since April, and Tim and I go out for a little, you know, when we have time off, but the focus is the band.
Suspicion that things here are not as they seem. Oh, reassure me. Why do I feel as if I'm in too deep?
Well, I think we've made great music before. And I think that our early records, 1, 2, 3, were really, they're part of something. We started to get lost shortly after that.
But what I did, I thought needed be done.
We went to record our 4th studio record with Lily White. We never really thought about using anyone else.
The band said they wanted to do it at their own studio in Charlottesville. It's very different recording in your hometown. When you go away, you're going away to make a record. When you're recording in your hometown, you're going to work.
Instead of finding a unique place, we found sort of a big building.
It was dark and the ceilings were low and it was a beautiful summer and we were inside in this windowless cave. Everyone's relationship with each other and our relationship with Steve really didn't prosper there.
I think at that time, it just became hard on everybody.
The vibe was not very good because Dave had to dig into his soul, and what was coming out was very interesting.
Oh, how I wish this to turn.
After about 6 months, we had to go back on the road, and we didn't really have anything to show for it.
Seeing the way this album was going, which was further into a dark place, instead of coming to me and saying, look, Steve, you know this band better than anyone else. Can we turn this to a different way? You know, can we steer it? It wasn't done. And there was a sense of, you know, something has to happen.
In the end, the way to get out of that was just to move away from the whole thing, including Lily White.
When we stopped recording in June,